Hey everybody, welcome back to the Frugal Filmmaker Q&A. I've been gone for a couple of weeks, but I'm back. This is the show where you ask me a filmmaking question and I try to answer it. If you'd like your question read on the show, please send me an email to thefrugalfilmmaker@gmail.com. That's your best chance you have of getting your question read on the show, or you can comment below, or you can send me a message on Twitter @FrugalFilmmaker. My video last week was a review of the Stayblcam, which was a portable, collapsible, gimbal-based stabilizer. You put your camera on, it's got a counterweight, gives you floating shots ideally. And in that review, I actually got a comment from Elvaro Productions, who said with the advent of the motorized gimbal, I wouldn't think that there is much of a market for this product anymore. While motorized gimbals are definitely all the rage, there is still a market for less expensive counterbalance stabilizers that I think are just fine. And that's probably because if you want to save a lot of money, you're going to use an old-fashioned type of stabilizer. And if you have money to spend, you might want to think about the motorized gimbal stabilizer. They start about $300 for cell phones and then go up from there. And of course, you also have counterbalance stabilizers like GlideCam models or FlyCam models or Steadicam Merlin, for example, that are more expensive and that kind of collide in the price range, which is where you have to start asking yourself the question, is it worth it to have a really nice counterbalance stabilizer versus a really decent motorized gimbal stabilizer? Because they are going to have some overlap there and you really get some really smooth and nice shots with those motorized gimbals. Of course, there are other differences. The motorized gimbal is super easy to learn, where the counterbalance stabilizer takes a lot more practice, but the counterbalance stabilizer, like Steadicam, GlideCam, don't use batteries or electronics, where the motorized gimbals definitely do. So if weather is an issue, or battery life, for example, shooting out in the field, maybe you don't have a charger that you can have access to. Just one thing you have to consider is that when you're out in the field, definitely the counterbalance stabilizer is going to take you farther because it doesn't have any batteries, and if there's adverse weather, you'll definitely want that one, because if it's raining, for example, you can still get your Steadicam shots with that type of stabilizer, where the motorized one might not be able to endure the weather as much. Of course, you'd cover them both up, you'd have a camera, etc., etc. For me, it boils down to money. It's, do I want to spend that much money on a stabilizer that I'm only going to use once in a while? Either way, whether I have a counterbalance stabilizer or motorized gimbal stabilizer. For me, I don't know. I would definitely look into the $300 model if I was shooting on a cell phone, but I'm not. I'm shooting on kind of a DSLR style Sony NEX5N, and if I wanted to get one of those for my camera, it would cost me upwards of $700 because it's a heavier, bigger camera, adapted lenses and so forth. So have to consider all those factors when purchasing, but there's definitely a market. I think those products are perfectly viable. I happen to not like the Stayblcam, but there are other ones in that price range that I'm sure work better. I just haven't tested them all yet. So next up, we have a question from Twitter from Dick Wolf, who says, how do you keep focus on a fast-moving shot with, for example, a Steadicam? My answer, or my belief, is that you can't pull focus on a device like that because you can't really reach up and manually turn the lens. So how would you do that? I guess you could do it remotely with some sort of electronic wireless gizmo, but then you're talking about a lot of money. So fast-moving shot, Steadicam, I think your best bet is just to shoot wide, get the widest angle lens you have, use that. Set it to infinity, and I think you're good, because there's no way you're going to put a long lens on a Steadicam on a fast-moving shot anyway. So logic dictates you just use a wide lens. If you're using a wide lens, you're going to have a more deep focus, and you won't have to worry about pulling focus. Just set it to infinity and go. All right, on to email from Omar, who says, for my upcoming short film, my friend and I will be borrowing a Rode Video Mic Pro. Our plan was to attach the video mic to one end of our DIY boom pole and attach the recorder to the other end. We need a wire to attach the Rode video mic to the recorder, so I looked around the internet and found a Rode 3.5mm cable. I then took a look at the reviews and found that many reviewers stated they got interference from their phones and other devices. Is there any way I can connect the mic and recorder using some sort of balanced connection that's still 3.5mm? Omar here is basically looking for a balanced solution to his unbalanced problem, and that is he's got a microphone on the end of a pole. He's going to run an unbalanced cable down to his recorder, and as a result, he's afraid of getting interference. Now, I don't really know how much interference you're going to get from an unbalanced cable with a run that's not that long. The 10-foot cable he linked me to could possibly get interference because it's 10 feet long, and the longer run you have with an unbalanced cable, the more noise you are susceptible to getting, which is why the XLR cables are ideal for noise reduction, noise cancellation. That's what they're designed to do. They've been doing it for years. So if you're really worried about noise being introduced on that unbalanced cable, I would say get a balanced cable, an XLR cable, and then have some kind of an adapter, a 3.5mm XLR adapter that goes into that cable at the beginning. And then once you get to your recorder, you have an XLR to 3.5mm or 1/8" adapter on that end. So that way you'll be introducing your balanced cable into the equation, and it should eliminate any potential noise. Although again, I don't know how much noise along the length of a boom pole you're really going to get if you're using an unbalanced cable. It's hard to tell, but you could definitely give yourself insurance using the XLR and the accompanying adapters. Next up is Tom Lewis, who says, I've recently decided to try my hand at some YouTube videos. I'm having a difficult time getting the lighting correct. I'm in a small room, much like yours. The lighting seems quite harsh in most of my video. Your lighting looks spot on. Would it be possible for you to turn your camera around and show us the lighting you are using? I made a video previously that explained my lighting situation in my laundry room / studio here, but I'd be happy to go ahead and turn a camera around, namely my cell phone camera, right here to kind of show you what I'm looking at. That's my camera, my Sony on my Frugal fattener right there on my tripod. And the only lights I have lighting this room are my Frugal bug lights right there. That's a light stand holding a light fixture with a Y adapter and then two 60-watt equivalent daylight LED bulbs. That's one of them, and the other one is right there. So I basically got four 60-watt equivalent light bulbs bouncing off of a white ceiling, which definitely helps for some reflection. If you're wondering what those blankets on the light stands are, those are just to help with sound dampening in this room because I get a whole lot of reverb if I don't use items like blankets and comforters and things like that. So that's my setup. I just have those two light sources right there illuminating this room, bouncing off the ceiling. There are four bulbs and they are daylight balanced. But I think that I'm definitely helped by all the white walls and things. I have a chroma key set up right here, but I've got white walls there and ceiling and everything else bouncing into my face. I noticed on your video, Tom, that you're actually in a somewhat dark room. You're in front of dark wood cabinets and probably walls maybe and the floor, I don't know. But all that kind of stuff is going to really suck the light into all those objects and not reflect it like this room has the white walls, so I'm really fortunate in that aspect. But that's something you might want to look at if you're dealing with a darker room like you. But use bounce, that's definitely helping me, or maybe add bounce in your room. You could always add a reflector or whiteboard onto the walls that are behind or right above the lights like I've got, and that'll create the bounce that just sends more light in my direction. Again, I'm using area lighting, not three-point lighting or anything else like that. It's just blasting light all over the place and it just happens to land properly. I've had situations in the past where I've tried to use available light in the room and it looks okay, but this definitely is the best looking setup I've ever had, and it's really not that difficult to do. So if you're curious more about my setup here, just go to that video that I referenced earlier. It was one episode in a series I did about how I set up this studio, so check that out if you're interested, and good luck. And finally we have Charlie Hall, who says, Yo, I'm writing one of my first short film scripts. What's the best way to add depth to my characters so the audience cares about them without making them too complex? Well, this is a really good question. I love questions about screenwriting or character development or things like that because it's sort of something different for this show or this channel, which is mostly DIY based. So how do you create interesting, sympathetic characters in a short film? We really don't have a lot of time to do much to create these characters. So when you introduce the characters, do something that makes them sympathetic, or have them do something that makes them sympathetic. It could be all kinds of things. It could be how they treat somebody. Maybe they help, a dog out of the road, or perform some kind of good deed, or they just smile at somebody, or they do something polite or nice. Or do you feel sorry for them because maybe they're in a really bad situation, maybe they're crying. You can look at other films of any kind and just look at what the filmmakers in those films are doing to create a sympathetic character. Look at feature films, grab your DVD collection, just look at when a character is introduced. I think the only way you might not do this is maybe in a franchise where the character's already been established. But the first time you meet a character, watch what the filmmaker does. Watch what the director does to get your sympathy for that character. Also watch for close-ups, because often the director will point your eyes in a specific direction about what they are doing to emphasize the fact that there's something they're doing that is sympathetic. In my last short film, Invader, I did something that I hoped would make the audience feel sympathy for my main character, was that you see her searching a dead body for who knows what. It's a post-apocalyptic world, and then you see her find this dead body and she searches it and she finds food. And she eats the food and looks satisfied.
You're eating my lunch.
We probably don't know when her last meal was, so seeing her eat and seeing her feel somewhat filled, I think anybody can relate to, because we've all been hungry, right? And we can appreciate the fact that she's hungry and found food. Now that's something really super basic and is not emotional or mental on any level. It's simply visceral. You can also look at your own life and think about times where you've met somebody or seen somebody and you felt empathy or sympathy for them, and ask yourself why you're having those feelings. And once you figure that out, you can then introduce those things into your own films. Okay, so that's all of our questions this week. Again, I'd like to thank everybody who wrote in. Always great questions, really interesting topics. It propel me in a certain direction, which I hope helps you. And if you'd like your question read on the show, please send me an email to thefrugalfilmmaker@gmail.com. That's your best chance you have of getting me to read your question on this show. Or you can always comment below, or you can leave me a message on Twitter @FrugalFilmmaker. Remember, we'll have an official Frugal Filmmaker video later this week, and then the following Tuesday we'll have another Q&A, only it will be Trivia Tuesday. So watch for that. We'll see you then. Bye-bye.